This is Lesson 20, Part 4, and it is time to practice.
We learned that one way we can increase the duration of a note value is to tie it to another note value. If we are looking at these note values on a staff, they're going to need to be on the same line or the same space in order for this to be possible. But this can be a very useful tool if the composer wants to use a long note value but a bar line or measure line is getting in the way. So this two-measure example is in 3/4 time. So first let's interpret the time signature. So the top three will tell us that there are 3 beats in a measure. And then the bottom number will tell us what kind of note or rest value will be our beat or pulse note. In this case, think of it as the denominator of a fraction. It reminds us that a quarter note or quarter rest will be our beat or pulse note. So now we can apply this to our note value pyramid. Quarter notes will be 1 beat, half notes will be 2 beats, whole notes are going to be worth 4 beats, eighth notes half a beat, and 16th notes just a quarter of a beat. I already have some note values here in these measures. So let's just figure out, first of all, how many beats are accounted for in each of these measures. So we have a half note. This half note will be worth 2 beats. 1, 2, so we're missing 3. Here we have a half note worth 2 beats. We're going to call this 2 and 3. The last 2 beats of the measure. We're missing beat 1. And let's say as the composer, I would like to keep this consistent pattern of a 2-beat note, and I want another 2-beat note, and then I want a final 2-beat note, but this measure line is getting in the way. If I want one more 2-beat note, what I can do is take 1 quarter note and put it on this side of the bar line. That's a total now of 3 beats, so that's all I'm allowed for this measure. And then I can put another quarter note over here, and now this is also worth 3 beats. So both measures are filled out, and now I can draw a tie between those note heads, and this will allow me to have a 2-beat note even though there's a measure line in the way. So as an example, I'll just keep a steady beat here. And then I'm just going to speak this rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, go. Do, do, do. So notice I did not say a do again here. I held it as if this was just a half note. And remember that any note value can be tied to another note value as long as they're on the same line or the same space. So for example, I could have a whole note tied to a dotted quarter note, and that would likely be over a measure line, so it would look like this. I could tie a, let's say, half note to an eighth note, and it could look like that. Or perhaps it's a half note tied to an eighth note that's connected to another eighth note, and that could look like this. There's really endless possibilities. Another way of increasing the duration of a note or rest value is to add a dot. So for example, we could draw a dot to the right of a whole note, and this would be called a dotted whole note. And a dot is always worth half of whichever note it's dotting. So for example, this whole note would be worth a whole note plus, well, half of a whole note. So that would be a half note. We can have a dotted half note where we just add a dot to the right of the note head. And this dotted half note would be worth a half note plus, well, a dot is worth half of whatever note value or rest value it's dotting, so plus a quarter note. A dotted quarter note would look like this, a quarter note with a dot to the right of the note head, and it would be worth a quarter note plus, the dot is worth half of whichever note or rest value it's dotting, so plus an eighth note. If we were to say that an eighth note equals our 1 beat or our pulse note, and we applied that to our note value pyramid, so eighth notes are worth just 1 beat. That means quarter notes are worth 2 beats, 4 beats for a half note, 8 beats for a whole note. We'll stop there. So let's just do the math here. You can see that a dotted whole note then would be worth 8 beats plus 4 beats for a total of 12 beats. Okay, and a dotted half note would be worth 4 beats plus 2 beats for a total of 6 beats. A dotted quarter note would be worth 2 beats plus 1 beat for a total of 3 beats. And recall, we have gone over this now a couple times, that you can start seeing the relationship here, that it would take 2 dotted quarter notes to equal 1 dotted half note. And it would take 2 dotted half notes to equal 1 dotted whole note. So in other words, a dotted whole note is worth twice as much as a dotted half note. A dotted half note is worth twice as much as a dotted quarter note, and we could keep on going down the tree. Just like a whole note is worth twice as much as a half note is worth twice as much as a quarter note is worth twice as much as an eighth note is worth twice as much as a 16th note. So there's a dotted note value tree, just like there's an undotted note value tree. We are going to be delving into this concept of a dotted note and a dotted rest value tree in an upcoming lesson. So I just want to start breaking this down for you so you can become a bit familiarized with it. Returning to Rhythm Workshop by Sally K. Albright. Jumping ahead here to lesson 25 in the 4/4 section of the book, we'll start by just looking at our time signature. Now very familiar, 4/4 time. Remember that the top number of a time signature tells us how many beats there are in a measure. So in this case, 4 beats per measure, and the bottom number of a time signature tells us what kind of note value will be our beat or pulse note. So in this case, we think of that 4 as the denominator of a fraction. That reminds us that a quarter note is going to be our beat or pulse note. Now we can take this information over here to our note and rest value pyramids and apply that. So now we know for sure that we can give exactly 1 beat to quarter notes and quarter rests, 2 beats to half notes and half rests, 4 beats to whole notes and whole rests, and half a beat to eighth notes and eighth rests. Our next task is going to be just to mark our do's, if you find this helpful. So I'm going to mark our first do right here. Quarter note equals 1 beat, so that's it. Do, 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 do. Even though there's a tie, we're still going to need to think that do quietly inside ourselves. We need to give 2 do's to this half note, and then 1 do to this quarter note, quarter rest, quarter note, quarter rest, quarter note, 1 beat for each of these. So this line is pretty easy. Let's go to the next line. Here we have a dotted quarter note. So we know that we have a do at the beginning of that. And remember that the dot is going to be worth half of whichever note value it's dotting. So that's worth an eighth note. So if we think about that, if this is our do, our dot is going to start our next do, but we won't need to say that because we're just going to be holding this note through. So this is where our day will fall. So that means my next do falls right here. Do, 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 all these quarter notes, even though we see a tie here. 2 do's for a half note, 1 do or 1 beat, we can say, for a quarter note. Now we have a dotted half note. So remember, the half note is already worth 2 beats. So we're going to do 2 slash marks for that. The dot is worth half of whichever note value it's dotting. So if a half note is dotted, we know that dot is worth a quarter note. So we're going to throw another slash mark. So all together, this dotted half note is worth 3 beats if we're in 4/4 time. Here's our next do. A do for the rest, do for the quarter note, do for the rest. Now we're just going to look and see what our smallest note value is, and we can see it's an eighth note. It doesn't happen often, just 1/8 note down here, but it will likely be helpful to keep a steady track of due day, due day, due day, due day going inside ourselves. I'm just going to look at that one measure and just break it down. I'm going to mark in how my due days fall. So that quarter note is worth a due day, and this little dot here then is worth just 1/8 note. Okay, and I'm going to right away beam him to this little orphaned eighth note over here, and that's how I'll get all my beats accounted for. A due day fills up this quarter note, another due day here. And again, I can mark in the syllables for now. So due day, due day, due day, due day. And then I can underline and cross out the syllables based on which ones I'm actually going to need to speak and which ones I can just think internally or mouth or whisper, whichever is most helpful to you. So we need to say this do, but then this day and the next do will actually be silent. I'm just going to continue to hold this do throughout this period. And then I do need to say this day. I do need to say this do, but I'll just hold that through the day. I need to say this do, I'll hold that through the day. Notice that on my next do, right here, I will not speak that. I'll just continue to hold since this is a tie. Let's try speaking this measure right here without a pulse kept in our hands at this point. I'm just going to try speaking the syllables and mouthing the ones I don't need with a relatively stable pulse. Do, day, do. Then I can keep a slow, steady pulse without a metronome on and try speaking this rhythm while maintaining a pulse. Ready, go. Do, day, do. Then we're going to go ahead and try this entire example, setting the metronome at 60 and keeping this steady beat in your hands or in your feet. Also trying to keep a steady pulse going in your mind or whispered or mouthed as it's helpful to you of due day, due day, due day, due day. 1, 2, ready, clap. 1, 2, ready, speak. Do, 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 day, do, 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 do. Going back to lesson 8 in the 4/4 section of the book, we're going to jump down here to example 3. We're still in 4/4 time, so we won't rework our note and rest value pyramids. Notice that we have whole notes, so they'll be worth 4 beats. We have quarter notes worth 1 beat each, half notes and half rests. Remember, the half rests are the lighter hats that sit on top of the line. Those are worth 2 beats each in this time signature. Remember that we want to keep our stable pulse going through all long notes and through all rests. Our smallest note value is a quarter note, so we don't really need to subdivide a pulse just beyond thinking in do's. We're setting our metronome at 80, and we're going to clap this beat or put the beat into our feet. 1, 2, ready, clap. 1, 2, ready, speak. Do, 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 do. Do,